This is The Express with Gary Allen, your 360-degree view of the world. Now, here's your host, Gary Allen.
And good evening, everybody. Gary Allen with you here on The Express. We have an exciting show for you. I hope everybody, excuse me, I'm fighting a cold again. I hope everybody had a great week since the last time we talked, and I hope everything is going well for you. Can you believe we're in October already? My God, I just can't believe that. And the temperature here in Florida was 95 degrees today, and it never cooled down. I mean, just never really cooled down. But anyway, I hope everybody's doing well. Randy, thank you so much. I know you're listening. And to all of you out there who take a few minutes to join us here on The Express, I appreciate that very, very much. Tonight's guest is a woman who I've wanted to have on for a while, and we got her to commit finally to this show. She's an extraordinary person, an accomplished young lady in her own field. Dr. Laura Sicola is a leadership communications expert, speaker, and author of a book she's going to talk about later on, Maximize Your Leadership Influence. She has coached business owners, politicians, executives, and organizations on how to confidently present themselves as true leaders, both on and off the stage, in order to get the results they want and make a positive, lasting impact. She has a BA in International Studies from American University. A university was across town from where I went when I was living in Washington, D.C. She's a bilingual, multi-subject teaching credentials from California State University. She has an MA from Multicultural Education, California State University, again, and a PhD in Educational Linguistics from the University of Pennsylvania. So without that going any further, and she's also a member of the TED organization, TED Talks. She's a leadership counselor. She you name it, she does it. She has her own business, which is an absolutely fantastic business, which is called and she's the founder of Vocal Impact Productions. Joining us is Dr. Laura Sicola. Dr. Sicola, good evening to you.
It's great to be here, Gary, but you have to promise me one thing.
Yes, ma'am.
You're gonna call me Laura.
Oh, yeah, I will. I just, I believe in, it's like I have Loretta Swit coming on next week, and I'm not sure if I can call her Loretta or Miss Swit or what, but I always try to be as polite as I possibly can to everyone because it's important to do so.
Sure. Great manners. They're never going to go stale, but so thank you for that.
Well, absolutely. I didn't realize, we spoke yesterday, but I didn't realize you went to school at my crosstown rival I was at GW for a while. Yep.
They have a great school, both of them. Terrific.
Yeah, when I left the Air Force, I left there and went down south to what my sister, who went to Harvard, says Suntan University, the University of Miami.
Nice.
But she doesn't realize that you're not a fool to get in there. I mean, you can't, it's not all what it claims to be. How did you get involved in public speaking?
I think I just never stopped talking once I started after the age of 2, something like that. So I figured I might as well find a way to take that propensity and just put it to good use.
Mm-hmm.
But seriously though, I just, communication has always been a fascination for me, from being raised monolingual English, but my grandmother was from Chile. And I remember her coming to visit us at Christmas time and watching her, what was I, 5 years old, something like that, and hearing her on the telephone talking to her siblings in Spanish, and which to me was this magical secret power code language. And I thought, I have to be able to do that. That was, I think, the first goal I ever set for myself. And it's just always been about the curiosity of talking to people and being understood, making yourself understood and understanding them. And that has evolved through education and now into executive coaching and public speaking, presentation skills. What is it, the art and the science of being able to connect with somebody and helping them completely understand what it is that you're trying to convey and knowing that you can completely understand them?
Some of the things that we're going to go over tonight as I was preparing for the show and as I was going through this wonderful book, which we will talk about, Maximize Your Leadership Influence. I hope all of you go out and get it. It's really a simple read in the sense of how the book is laid out. We'll discuss why it was laid out the way it is, but it helps you understand what it is and what it takes to be a leader in every facet of leadership. But I also noticed too, Laura, that a lot of that's in there could also be applied to the everyday person if they just wanted to improve their communication skills, as well as, excuse us, those of us that are in show business who communicate for a living. Now, I don't know, being a talking head, if I'm in show business anymore or not, but nevertheless, I took a great deal away from it, and at the same time went, that is a lot of the stuff we learn in acting school, how to do this, how to do that, and first appearances mean everything, and stuff we will discuss as the program moves forward. Is this a book not only for leadership and people in the business world, but also for the everyday person if they just want to improve their communication skills in life?
100%. Yes. This is something that was written from the perspective of the business professional, but the principles that are what it's discussing are intended for absolutely everybody. I use a lot these principles when I'm talking to my husband, to my kids, to my neighbors. These are all important. I mean, think about some of the most sensitive conversations you have, the ones that could go south really fast, are usually in your own house, aren't they?
Yeah,
So,
and particularly in my house where there were 9 kids and 2 adults. They went south real fast.
well, the real question is how many bathrooms?
Well,
9 kids, 2 adults. I mean, if
2
this is one
adults,
of those
they had
houses
their
with like 3 bedrooms and 1.5 bathrooms, I can see this conversation is getting tense really fast.
Oh yeah, I finally didn't get a bathroom until I came home from the military and was going at first to the university. Well, I went to Miami-Dade first. I had to take some classes before I could get into the UM, and then I had a bathroom because I was living at home at first. Then I had the bathroom because they were all gone. They were all gone. And I'll never forget the first thing that I said to my mother one Sunday morning when I took a shower and it was hot water and everything was great when I first had moved home. And I come out and I said, so that's what it's like to have a bathroom all by myself. And my mom just started to laugh. And she said, yeah, Dad didn't realize how many of you were going to stay home for a while until you finally moved on. But
he would have padlocked the door earlier.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was my brother Greg and I. That's how that was, and now, as a matter of fact, I'm so proud of Greg. For everybody who's on this program, he just returned from the Middle East, and he's a priest. He's a priest, and he got to meet the Pope, and he got to travel through the Middle East, and I'm just so proud of him. And he's another person.
Amazing.
I hope he's listening tonight because he's another person who communicates for a living, and he has to be able to learn how to communicate. What was it in the business world that you saw a void that you said, I can fill that?
It's interesting because that you mentioned your brother being a priest, because I do work with clergy as well, because these principles are important whether you are in a boardroom or at the pulpit or leading a Bible study or whatever location. It's all relevant. As far as the gap, I kept hearing the same thing over and over again, which was that in the context of succession planning, meaning sort of grooming the next round of leaders who's going to be moving up to fill the top spaces, I kept hearing the same concern. And it was along the lines of, he or she is really great, brilliant, so good at their job, so technically qualified, so smart, but, and it's that but that was the kiss of death. That but was usually, but he's not a great communicator, but he's a bull in a china shop, but she's conflict averse and tends to run away from things, or he's a lousy speaker. We can't send him to conferences or to do presentations or to do fundraising or to talk to the board. It's always that but. So you can have all the tech skills you want, but if you can't articulate that vision that you've got in a way that other people who maybe don't share your technical expertise are going to completely get it and be able to get on board with it, then you're just not going to be effective as a leader. You'll be the person everybody wants on the team to do the numbers and do the grunt work and do the legwork, but not to lead from the head. And that's the gap.
And I would suppose when we talk about the technical world, the computer world, the people who've created these computers and everything, very few of them that I've met over the years can effectively communicate anything to me except their world.
And honestly, that's the problem that most people have. And when I say they're technically qualified, I mean in law, in finance, in architecture, in agribusiness, whatever it happens to be, that's your technical area, not just in IT kind of technical or something like that.
Oh, no, I understand that.
Yeah. But you're absolutely right. The people who tend to be more quote unquote numbers people, you're in accounting, you're in engineering, you're in IT, all of that. Often you go that direction because you don't like the communication people stuff in the first place. You like your computers, you like your numbers, you like to be able to sit down, do your work by yourself, et cetera. And that's great. You'll move up to a certain level in your career based on that. But then you hit that plateau, that glass ceiling that says, if you want to get past here, you need to work on the stuff you've been avoiding for the last 10 or 20 years of your career. And that's all the talking stuff. That's all the people skills, all the quote unquote soft skills, which I hate that term, by the way, because really soft skills are hard. That's what people discover. So that's where we need to help them close the gap.
As you have moved forward, and we're going to talk a little bit about something we talked about the other day, but before I get to that, as you've been working with a lot of companies, Fortune 500 companies and everything over the years, have you found those little gems of people in the management teams that really are very good at communicating, but have been kept in that cubicle of, oh, I'm really afraid to talk in front of a group of people? And have you been able to help them burst through the ceiling? And now they're like you and I, they can't shut up. I mean, this is what they love to do. I'll be honest with you. The first time I ever got a laugh on stage, I was 12 years old. No, I was 5 years old in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. I was one of the three wise men. I knelt down and I heard a thud because I didn't knelt down. I'm not very graceful. I got a laugh, and I went, oh, I can get a laugh. But do you find people in different corporations that are maybe not the marketing people or they're just maybe a supervisor, but they do indeed have these inner qualities that need to be brought out?
Absolutely. Everybody has something that needs to be polished up a bit more. It's like leadership in general. You can say whether leaders are born or made, whether you have the right stuff in your gut or you have to be really chiseled from the original brick in order to find your leadership piece, you still have to polish in the end. Nobody's born polished. So as far as speaking is concerned, there's a lot of people who have to sorry, somebody's knocking at my door. I lost my train of thought.
Okay.
But as far as what was it? Sorry.
Yeah,
prompt me.
Somebody.
What was your question? Sorry.
Yes, somebody who is basically shy about their communication skills and getting up in front of people. Now, all of a sudden, you've discovered them, and wow, they're out there now.
Yeah. So shy is its own world. Because there's lots of people who aren't shy, but still aren't good at talking in certain contexts. So let's talk about that shy piece for a minute and the public speaking fear. If I'm not mistaken, that's like the number one fear in the United States is the fear of public speaking. It's greater than the fear of death. And I think it was Seinfeld who said at one point that if that's the case, then that means like 4 out of 5 people at any given funeral would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. I mean, that's a painful statistic when you think about it.
Yeah.
But the fear is really not of public speaking. The true fear, when you get right down beneath the surface, is the fear of public judgment. People are afraid of being evaluated. They're being afraid of being judged. So they don't want to make a mistake in public. That's the fear that somebody's going to nail them for it. But so here's the secret. And here's the secret that I share with all of my clients and all of the people that I'm training or coaching. It's 4 words. You ready? Those 4 words are, it's not about you. When you're getting up there to public to speak, whether you're on stage or doing a radio show like this, or just leading a meeting in front of half a dozen people, the idea is not to focus on, oh my gosh, what if I screw up? What if I make a mistake? What if they don't like me? The idea is focus on them. Because when you're in the meeting or when you're in the audience, you're not looking like some stereotypical high school English teacher with a red pen poised, waiting to ding the people and take away points, right? You're sitting there going, boy, I'm here. I hope this guy's good. I want to learn something. I want to be entertained. I want to be interested. So if you go out there as the speaker with your focus on giving the audience, whoever they are, 1 people, 1,000 people, 1 person, 1,000 people, whatever, and you focus your efforts on making sure they get the best experience possible, it changes everything. I actually gave that 4-word secret to a client, and when I explained it to her, I said, so how does that feel to you? And she said, honestly, the minute you said it, I instantly felt relieved. I thought to myself, I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all there is to it. That's the start.
I have found, you and I talked about this yesterday a little bit. I've done some game show work over the years, and from time to time, we want to get contestants out of the audience. And we have found it's easier to get male contestants than it has been in these corporations, female contestants. And the reason for it is, and I got this same answer over the years from a lot of different women who are not CEOs, but middle management and everything else. Oh, I don't want to go up and make a fool of myself in front of people.
See, it's the public judgment.
And I've even had people tell me who are starting out, my best advice to them is comics or talk show hosts or whatever the case may be. I always tell them, keep one thing in mind. If you miss a joke, they don't know that. You're in control. If you're a talk show host, and you miss a question, don't worry about it. I miss them all the time. But just keep going, but eventually over a period of time, you learn. I mean, I have notes in front of me. Half of these we probably won't even use because of the conversation we're having. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about people you will and will not work with. And we used the political analogy that we don't need to get into specific names, but somebody that ran for president and didn't win the last time, and somebody who did run for president and they won.
Way to avoid specifics.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's pretty obvious. And you had, and I can't remember the context of how you were asked the question, but you basically said, I would not work with that person, but I will work with this person. In context of major businesses that you've come across, the people you will not work with are the types of people that are what?
The simple answer is coachable. And to contextualize what you just mentioned, I was on a speaking circuit doing an analysis just before the last presidential election and comparing the communication styles of the Trump and Clinton campaigns and looking at what each was doing that was effective or not effective. It was nonpartisan. It wasn't biased in either way, just looking at what was effective or not. And what a question that I often got from the audiences as I took this program on the road was, would you be willing to coach either person and either candidate? And I said, for one reason and one reason only, the answer is yes, I would coach her. I would not coach him, only because he is not coachable. She is. He is only interested in people who are going to tell him he's right, whether or not you agree with his politics. He really is not looking for people to challenge him and push him out of his comfort zone, which is why he's gone through so many people in that role. But she is, for better or for worse, I think she listened to the wrong people if she wanted to win. So that was a shame because whoever decided that campaign strategy was, well, they obviously made a mistake. But that notwithstanding, it is about who's coachable. So I always have to do an intake with a new prospect, a new potential client, to see what they're like. Because if they really are looking for me to stroke their egos, or when I challenge them on some ideas up front, they push back, or they can make excuses, or they try to explain what I should have understood or should have meant. All right, they're not hearing, they're not listening, they're not interested in growth. They are ego-driven, and that's okay, but I can't work with someone my job is not to put my head through a brick wall on a daily basis. I want to work with people who want to learn and want to take what I can give them and run straight through to the finish line.
We're talking to Dr. Laura Sicola, leadership communications expert. She's also the founder of Vocal Impact Productions. She's also the author of Maximize Your Leadership Influence. She has done many seminars, and we're going to get into some of that here in just a little bit. This is Gary Allen from The Express, and I'm happy all of you have taken the time to join us. What are some of the biggest stumbling blocks to someone being an effective communicator before we get into your book and some of the things that you do when you teach? But what are some of the biggest things that you've seen that just drive people, other than the fact they're scared of getting up in front of people? What are some of the other stumbling blocks that, besides shyness, that stops them?
One of the most common is what I call the expert's curse. And that's something that you sort of referred to or alluded to earlier, where maybe you're really good at IT or at finance or whatever your area is, but the challenge is to be able to explain your ideas to somebody who's not an expert in that area. Maybe you're explaining it to the CEO or to a major client or to somebody else. We're not talking about dumbing it down. It's just that they don't have all of the background that you do. And frankly, they don't need it or want it. But the person who's giving the information, because they're an expert, they don't know how to filter what is truly critical information for that person to hear and what's not. They tend to omit some of the necessary little explanatory pieces to give them the background they need. And then they go into the weeds, which is often the expression that's used. They get lost in the weeds, giving all this technical minutia, which just makes people's eyes glaze over. You have to be able to take that step back and say, no, for this person, let me fill in this little blank for them first so they know what I'm talking about, and then only give them this so they get it and move on. And until you learn to do that, you're going to constantly be spinning your wheels.
Yeah. I had the privilege of sitting in on a Apple's convention, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, everybody around me understood what was going on. I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what am I doing here? I don't have a clue what's going on.
Right.
They're talking, and this was before the cloud came along and they were first introducing it. What is the cloud? The cloud is something I see when I fly. What are they talking about? Where is this going?
Sure.
Like
when people talk about blockchain.
Exactly. Have you always been a problem solver?
Well, it depends on who you ask. Some people might say I'm a problem starter, but I like to think of myself as a problem solver, yes, especially with regard to being understood. It's always a frustration of mine, that whole, I think I'm being clear on something, and then you get pushback in ways you didn't expect, and you go, what did I miss? Why didn't he understand what I meant? What's the difference between what I thought I said and what he thought he heard? And that's a constant source of fuel in my fire.
What have you seen different in the business culture now that you didn't see when you first got started? What are the changes that have occurred that either make your job easier or harder?
Easier versus harder is relative depending on the person, but I think there's so much more work, for example, being done virtually on Skype, on GoToMeeting, or on WebEx, Zoom, Skype, etc., that people have to get used to communicating in more virtual media and being able to talk on camera, being able to give presentations in a different format now, and to be comfortable in those contexts. That's something that was not nearly as common 10 years ago, almost at all. If anything, there were webinars that were strictly auditory, which a lot of people weren't terribly good at either, for that matter. But now as we get more into video, it's becoming even more important that the person leading the conversation is knowledgeable and has a bit of charisma, has a little bit of screen presence. So that's something I end up working on.
Yeah, I mean, that's something in the acting world. When you're taking acting classes, you learn all of that. Are you surprised over the years of the CEOs, whether they be men or women, that have actually not cared about how they look? I mean, there are some CEOs I know that are distinguished dressers and very dapper and everything like that, and women the same way. But are you surprised at how many of them you go to meet and they really aren't put together very well? They don't make a good presentation of themselves?
I don't know that that's exclusive to the CEOs. I think that kind of trickles all the way down, for better or for worse. And I think there's two categories. There are a few who genuinely don't care and don't think it matters and don't realize that they're projecting the wrong image. But more often than not, the ones I come across are those who just do not realize that their clothes don't fit right, the way they do their hair or their makeup or their whatever just does not suit them or does not flatter them. And I'm not talking about being a fashion mogul. You don't have to look like you stepped off the cover of GQ or whatever else, Vanity Fair. But it is a matter of just looking put together. I saw a great sign in a store window the other day, and I wish I had thought of it first. But the sign, it was in a women's clothing store, and the sign said, I want an outfit that says, listen to me, not look at me.
Ah.
And that was so powerful because that is the point, especially with women's clothing. Men's, a suit is a suit is a suit kind of a thing. Dress casual is the uniform is, a button down and dockers or something. But for women in particular, it's so hard to know where the line is between professional and inappropriate, not professional enough, and what's fashion versus what's too trendy. So the rules are very soft, constantly evolving. And of course, there's all the political correctness around it. Who's the one to tell her that there's a little too much cleavage showing, or that, this is just not working, or it's making clients uncomfortable or something like that. So, or that they're just not representing well. You look like a schlub if your, shirt's too baggy or whatever it is. So how do you have those conversations? That's where a lot of people don't get the input that they need because nobody knows how to talk to them in a way that isn't going to trigger a bunch of HR red flags.
The good thing about working in radio, the good thing to work about radio, you can dress like a schlub and nobody cares.
I love being a guest on the radio for that very reason. But working for the moment, assume that I'm wearing a really nice Armani suit.
Well, all right. We'll certainly go that direction and have a glass of iced tea. Everything will be marvelous. We'll certainly try that. What are some of the best skill sets that a leader needs for today? I know we're going to start getting into the book here a little bit, but what are some of the best skill sets for somebody who is getting into the job market and they see themselves in 10 or 15 years in a leadership role? What are some of the important lessons they need to know and some of the things that they may not be aware of that they need to know?
What's kind of funny, Gary, is that a lot of it is not rocket science. It's more conventional wisdom, but you don't, as a result of it being semi-conventional wisdom, you tend to blow it off. Things like, you need to be a good listener. And I don't mean sit there and just patronize somebody and not interrupt, although, of course, that's stage one. But beyond that, really listening to what they're telling you, listen to what they're not telling you, listen to what their body language is telling you, listen to what their voice is telling you, regardless of what their words are claiming. There's so many subtexts and little cues that will tell you that there's more going on than whatever they say. Yes and is one of the most difficult words you'll ever encounter, because when you're talking to somebody and they say yes or okay or something basic and affirmative like that, you don't know if that means they agree, that they're going to do what you want, or are they just telling you that they want you to stop talking, so they're going to placate you. And it's learning to really hear what people are and are not telling you is an incredibly important skill set. And the first thing you have to do is not multitask. We love to pride ourselves on the ability to multitask, and it is absolute self-sabotage, because at that point you're not neuroscience will show you, any research will show you that there's no such thing as multitasking. You're just pinging back and forth in microseconds between two things, and it makes both tasks inefficient and ineffectively done.
And sometimes, it's like, don't rush through it. Take your time, and you won't have to do it again. And multitasking has always seemed like that kind of a situation to me. And I'll be honest with you. I'm not a good multitasker. Yes, coming from a big family, I had to keep my eyes on a lot of different things. But some of the things that I've always thought about leadership. Now, I worked in the White House. I worked in a governor's office, and I also worked in an attorney general's office. And some of the most effective leaders that I ever met are like some of the people that I've admired in life, sometimes sports, sometimes usually in the arts. They don't lead by what they say so much as what they do. Mm-hmm. Their successes and how they go about things. And I will tell you something, even though Mrs. Clinton is not a communicator in any way, shape, or form, and compared to her husband, she's as silent as a church mouse. But real effective leaders that I've been around, or people that really are people that are admired, when they talk to you, like Clinton will shake your hand and he'll have both of his hands over your hand, and he's looking into your eyes. And for that moment in time, you're the most important thing he's doing. And you know it.
Yep. Very smart.
It's not like
Very
like
smart.
you go to a party and you're talking to somebody and they're looking over your shoulder or they're looking over here to see who else comes in the room. That's telling you,
Right.
I'm standing here with you for a minute, but I really would rather be over there if so-and-so shows up. And
Yep.
that to me is never, ever won me anything in particular. People in show business have a terrible thing to do about that.
Sure.
What are some of the biggest fears and do executives have fears and worries and about complacency in the workplace? I mean, to me, complacency is the kiss of death.
So complacency is a tough word. So when you talk about complacency, are we talking about just lack of engagement, like people who are going through the motions and leading teams? You're leading teams who are not fully engaged. They're not passionate about their work. They're just
they have
clock.
Yeah, well, no, they have a method. Say it's a big company like Walmart, and they've been doing things for 20 years this way. And so-and-so down the street opens up a competitor, and they're starting to take your business away, but they refuse to change their business model because, well, it worked in the past, and we're happy with it the way it is, and stuff like that. Do you find companies, they rest on their laurels a little too much sometimes?
Sometimes, yes, especially if it's something that has helped them to be successful in the past. It's a great book that you're probably familiar with, Marshall Goldsmith's book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Right? So
yes.
What worked in the early 2000s is not going to work now that we're approaching 2020. It may have been great then, but you have to evolve with the times, right? It's evolve or become extinct effectively. And the expression, whether or not it was effective, but the expression of because that's the way we've always done it, as answer to the question of why are we doing it this way is very difficult. I'm actually working with a client now whose presentation style for certain high-level programs is done in a way that, all things considered, is what I would say an extremely ineffective means of truly engaging the audience. And they brought me in to do training, and I said, okay, so here, I didn't realize that was the program, the modality that they used in the first place, that was the system they used. But they said, come in and work with us on how to be more effective presenters. I said, great. Started doing my presentation. Not a minute into it, they said, oh, well, we don't use screens. We don't project stuff. I said, okay, well, so let's start doing that. Oh, no, but we don't do that. Well, okay, why? Well, just because that's not the way people are used to doing it. Isn't that sort of the point? Isn't that why you brought me in to help you be more effective? Because you realize what you're doing is not
working.
Effective, right? Or it's working well enough, but clearly you believe that something is not optimal, or you wouldn't have called me in the first place. So why am I here? And it was kind of an interesting little dance to figure out where they were and were not willing to flex, and what were the concerns behind the change. So that's one of the bigger challenges, is when fear of change, which is inherent in everybody individually to some extent or other, and organizationally to an even bigger extent. And people are afraid of, okay, how is this going to make my life more difficult, even though in some way you think it's going to be better? Yeah. So that's the biggest fear most people have. And getting past it, getting down to the root of it, is usually what's required to make any real headway. And it's not always going to be leaps and bounds of progress in the beginning.
You're listening to The Express. Gary Allen with you with my guest, Dr. Laura Sicola. She's a leadership communications expert and speaker. And we're now going to be talking about her wonderful book, Maximize Your Leadership Influence. She has been a speaker and a teacher to many Fortune 500 companies. So the big 3 C's that she says is command the room, connect with the audience, and close the deal. One last thought on what you were just discussing. I had Michael Berger on with me last week, and he's written a book about success and everything. And the one word that always comes up when I'm talking to people about success and everything is, number one, adaptability. And number 2, Michael had a great saying, and it was said by Babe Ruth. And it was, today's home run isn't going to get you another home run tomorrow. And in other words, Rome wasn't built in a day, but every day they laid bricks. And I think that's
Yep.
what some people do. They get a couple of successes underneath their belt and they become complacent, and and some companies just will not adapt. And I think that's where the problems actually end up going in kind of a way. And it's kind of sad in so many ways. I want to now start talking about your book. It's interesting how it's laid out. It's a very easy read. I've read it twice now in a week, and I read it yesterday again as I was making my notes for today's show. Why did you lay it out the way it is, and explain to people the layout itself?
Sure. Again, the title is Maximize Your Leadership Influence, Command the Room, Connect with the Audience, and Close the Deal. And this is published by a publishing house called Think Aha. And when I saw their model, I thought, you know what, that's a great idea. The Aha books are, the simple explanation is, it is 140 Twitter length phrases, quotes. And each one is supposed to give you an aha moment as food for thought and ideas to take forward and really reflect on. So this is written out more as a reflective journal, a business journal, a workbook of sorts. And it's not just 140 random ideas. It is broken into chapters. The concepts within each chapter do build one on the other. But the idea is that whether you just want to open the book to a random page, stick your finger in it and see which quote you hit and allow that to be your inspiration for the day, or you want to sit down and actually read it from cover to cover, which will build in a natural and logical way, it is an easy way for people to get the most information possible. Because when you think about it, there's so many books that I buy thinking, oh, I need to read this. This looks great. And my bookshelf, my nightstand, it just piles and piles and piles up. You just don't get around to reading 300 pages at a time. So I thought, well, what if I had the 300-page book and then I distilled it all down to the Cliff Notes? What if I took notes on my own book and then I just published the notes? Wouldn't that be more effective? Wouldn't that be a great tool for people who are just too darn busy to sit down and read, to flip through and still get all the gold nuggets that they need to be effective? So that's what I built.
Yeah, and it really is effective. We're going to get into it now. We'll start off. Now, we're not going to talk about every section. This is a book. Where can people find the book, by the way?
Very easy, Amazon. When in doubt, go to Amazon.com, or on my website, you can go to www.vocalimpactproductions.com and go to the VIP to the shop page, and it'll be right there on top.
And a lot of the things that you teach and everything are just absolutely wonderful. Section 1 deals with speech, credibility, and influence. You talk about influence starts with credibility, and your credibility is based on how well you communicate. One of the examples you give is true power and influence is when you get people to see that you're a leader they genuinely want to follow. Yes.
Yes. So the problem is most people rely on the position in the company, where they are in the org chart and who they outrank. And they just assume, well, I'm their leader because I outrank them. And that's not the case. You're their boss because you outrank them. Leadership itself is an image. And you can be an intern in the mailroom or the CEO and be viewed as a leader or not. And the difference between whether people view you as a leader that they truly want to follow, whose vision they believe in, who they trust, or not, is the difference between whether they're going to give you their heart, mind, body, and soul, or they're just going to punch a clock because they're supposed to.
Yeah, there used to be a time in the military where people would what we call ride the pine. They reached a certain rank and they didn't care to contribute much else to the military. And this was all branches of the service until finally they said, okay, if you're in for 10 years, you got to be at this rank. If you're not, you're gone. And so it forced a lot of people that were riding the pine to get out. Another thing that you talk about, which I think is really cool, and when it comes to influence, is inspiration is the catalyst for action. Be a catalyst. Why aren't people more like that?
You used an important word earlier, which is complacency.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of people who just aren't particularly motivated themselves. They're very happy with the status quo. It's like, don't rock the boat. I know what I'm doing. Let me just keep doing it the comfortable way, rather than trying something new, possibly having it not work or creating problems. Or people are motivated to inaction for a number of reasons. But often there is just the fear of, can I do it? You mentioned a lot of women will avoid certain opportunities more so than men. There's research that shows, for men and women for that matter, that people are more motivated to avoid losing something
Mm-hmm.
than to possibly gain something even greater. There's just the possibility of the loss is a greater fire in the belly, the fear of loss. So the need to not make a mistake is big. And that's what we have to get past. The thing, if you want to really do something great, you have to be willing to take a risk.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you have to jump off a bridge, but you do have to be willing to stick your neck out a little bit to try, at least, put a toe in the water. But this is where your ability to communicate is important. Because if you think, oh, I can't talk to this person, my boss will never agree to that, the client would never be willing to try this, then you're shooting yourself down for them. It's like deciding you never want to date somebody because if you ask somebody out, they could say no, so why bother trying?
So that's the secret. I've been wondering for years why I'm still single. I never quite got that. But you're absolutely right.
I don't think you lack people to go up to and start conversations with. I don't think that's a challenge of yours.
Oh God, if people put me down for it all the time. They say, "Where do you get the gumption to walk up to somebody?" True story. I was in the White House under Nixon. And I would get invited to the White House parties from time to time, and I would go sometimes. Sometimes I wouldn't. You don't have to go. And sometimes I actually couldn't. And one night I walked over to a young lady who was a princess from some country. I didn't know that. I really didn't know that. And finally, later on, the president comes over to me when I'm talking to him. He says, "Boy," he said, "I was trying to talk to her all night long and her father, but you just made it seem easy. What's your secret, Gary?" I said, "Blind stupidity." And he just looked at me and he said, "Okay, I'll follow that." So, I mean, he was really cool. One of the things that we talked
that goes right along the lines of the expression that if you want something done, give it to the person who doesn't know what can't be done.
Yes, true. That propels a lot of people. They don't realize they're not supposed to be able to do it. And as you were talking about getting out there and putting your feet in the water, I can think, while you were talking about all the wonderful people, Walt Disney failed so many times. Colonel Sanders failed so many times.
Edison. Yep.
I mean, what's the old adage? You show me someone who's never failed, and I'll show you someone who's never tried.
Sure.
I mean, we look at failure as though it's supposedly something wrong with it. Actually, you learn more from failure. And with your victories, the complacency begins to settle in, and you start to think there's nothing wrong with me. And we see it in sports all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, think about it. In baseball, if you bat 300, you're great.
Yeah, and that's 3 out of 10 times.
Fail 7 out of times.
Yeah. Yeah. And my football team, well, let's not talk about the Colts very much, but they have a tendency to fail a lot these days. But they're starting all over. We talked earlier about expertise is not enough. And in section 2, you talk about that, why expertise is not enough. Being seen as a leader takes much more than having technical expertise. I want to touch on that because this chapter in particular really hit me because, excuse me, there are a lot of people in my business who are supposed experts at one thing or another. I like what I do. I enjoy what I do. There's a lot more that I need to learn as a talk show host. I'm certainly not perfect, even though I've worked with some of the best. You talk in here, one of the little things you say is, what will get you to the top is your ability to convey your vision clearly to key players, whether or not they share your expertise.
Yes. Yeah. And it goes along the lines of what I was referring to earlier. You have to understand that maybe I'm in finance. I need to talk to the people in marketing. I need to talk to the people in IT. I need to talk to the people in business development. And I need to be able to translate my ideas into language that they will understand and appreciate. And it's the same thing in your family. Maybe you're oriented one way and your significant other is oriented another way, and your kids, who are yours genetically, are still, you're thinking, okay, how did I possibly spawn that child? Because they're so completely different in how they think and what they like and how they're wired. So you have to be able to talk in terms that they will understand, that make sense to them. And until you learn to do that with a wide range of audiences, you're not going to have the influence that you want.
Yeah. We're talking to Dr. Laura Sicola, excuse me. She's from Visual Impact Productions. She's a leadership communications expert. We are talking about her wonderful book, Maximize Your Leadership Influence. You can get it on Amazon, and I recommend this book for anybody who is in the business world, even if you just want to improve your skills of communicating with somebody. If you're in retail or you're in major business or you're in show business, you're never too late to learn a good lesson, and you will learn a great deal from this book, as well as some of her TED Talks and everything that are on her website. It's absolutely, this is an extraordinary woman, a highly educated woman who went to Wharton and taught there as well. And
I went to Penn. I lectured at Wharton, but I taught at, I studied at Penn. I did not get my degree from Wharton itself. Wharton is the business school at Penn.
Okay. Somebody else claims someone else claims to have a degree from Wharton, and I'm kind of wondering maybe that year they slipped on graduation qualifications. I'm not really sure, and I think everybody can figure out who I'm talking about. You also talk about in this thing about expertise is show that your vision is even greater than your expertise. How? Share it in a way that gets you through the ears, minds, and hearts of the people you're talking to.
Mm-hmm. So if you are someone, for example, who is maybe you're a really detail-oriented person, and you're talking to someone who's a big picture person, or you're you're more of the cautious type, like you want to make sure all your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed before you're going to make any move, and you speak cautiously and just very conservatively, but to convince this other person to get on board, they are people who like excitement, and they're people who like big pictures and broader visions. You need to be able to step up and sell to that person. And I use the word sell, in air quotes per se, but it's really like, you can't just talk about the minutiae and, well, we're going to go cautiously. No, what are you excited about? Why are you going this direction at all? And vice versa. If you're someone who is big picture and you're always excited about the new shiny object out there, but you're talking to someone and you need them to get on board, but you know that they're the bean counter type. They're very detail oriented and they want to do all the risk management possible first before they commit to anything. Then you need to show them that you've thought through those details. You need to let them know that you aren't being just reckless and having shiny object syndrome. So being able to understand how someone else is oriented and provide them the kind of information and the kind of delivery that they're going to need to understand it, to feel what you feel, that's going to be what's going to click and get everybody into place. I'm working with a client now where that's the challenge. Like my one client is very much the auditor mentality, very, detail by detail, cautious. Let's make sure everything is in place. Her boss is someone who's very, we got to do this and let's go do this and we'll try about this and show me what's the update, blah, 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 very high energy and big picture. And she is constantly frustrated because the boss is frustrated, feeling like, where's the energy? Why don't I feel like there's progress coming from this person? And the other person is saying, but there is progress. It's here and it's here. And we have to watch this. And there should be progress here. And they're talking Spanish and Greek. It's just, it's the same content. The right material is there, but they're not translating it in a way that the other one's going to understand.
Yeah. Oh, somebody just sent me a message. The website is vocalimpactproductions.com. That's where you can find all the information. You can watch the videos. There's one video on there that's absolutely fabulous. It's been listened to 5 million times. and your TED Talks. If those of you are familiar with what TED Talk is, it's really great. Great. She's also trained. Dr. Laura has trained people for TED Talks. I wish I was intelligent enough to be able to do a TED Talk, but nobody wants to hear about the radio business in a TED Talk. That's for sure. The one thing before we move on to the next section that I really loved, and this is something that I'm going to remember for a long time. It's great to be known for something. But don't you want to be known for more than just something?
Yeah.
I just found that great. That's it.
Yeah. Yes. What's going to be on your epitaph?
Yeah.
Really something that's, what's your legacy? Yeah. Ask yourself, what legacy do you want to lead? And that should really motivate you. That should be something that is a driving force in life. That's a North Star. And if it's just like, well, she was good at her job. Really, okay, well, you're known for something. Congrats. But woo-wee. What motivates you? What's an inspiration to you? And then how do you make that an inspiration to others? Be known for that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I just think I find it fascinating. There are people who go through life and are content with being that. But I've always believed if you don't want to be the best at it, or the best the best Gary I can be, why am I trying? I mean, I'm not going to be Ted Koppel or somebody like that. I don't have that expertise, but if I can work hard to be the best Gary that I can be, then I fulfilled my destiny in a sense. And if along the way I've entertained and made people laugh, then hey, then that's something that maybe somebody will say, hey, I saw him once, he made me laugh. That was great. That's also wonderful. You talk about also your vocal section 5, the sound of the leadership. How you sound when you speak can be very powerful to the message you're trying to give. Do people understand that when you first get in front of them or when you talk to them, that the tone that you use, the words that you use, how you use them, how you construct a platform for your presentation is so vitally important, and also giving and telling stories that make them laugh and keep the audience up and down like a comedian or somebody on stage? Do people really understand that, or they just get out there and just blot out the minutia and, well, did you get it all? Okay, see you next week,
I think the kiss of death for a lot of people is 2 words: good enough. And they feel like, well, as long as my analyses are accurate, it's good enough. Well, I'll never be funny. And by the way, if you're not an inherently funny person, don't try. That is not the goal, right? I mean, you're not telling everybody they should go up and be comedians. And by the way, for the record, I want to clarify, I am not an actor. I am not a singer. I am not a speech pathologist or a medical doctor. I'm a linguist. So all of my work comes from understanding 2 things. 3 actually. 1, the way English language is structured at its root. 2, the way it's processed, the way speech is processed in the brain. And number 3 is the filters, the social filters, how we're conditioned that changes how we interpret what we hear and what makes us choose what we say and how we say it. And that combination is what makes things land or not land as we want. So people often don't understand. They're afraid, well, if I'm trying to teach them to tweak the way they speak, it's like, well, I don't want to act, I don't want to be fake. That's not really me. I'm going, whoa. I couldn't teach you to act if my life depended on it. I'm not your girl for that. It is recognizing that if you're trying to get a $50 million contract for something, good enough is not going to cut it. You have to be interesting. You have to be organized. Stories are great. Again, it doesn't have to be funny. You don't have to tell jokes. This is not a comedy show. But you do have to engage. And that's the key word. You have to engage the audience. And good enough does not engage. Good enough gets you a captive audience as opposed to a captivated audience. I want a captivated audience. Most audiences are captive. They are held there more or less against their will, or they're just waiting you out until the hour is over and they can get up and walk out, and then get a drink or something. But that's the challenge. Good enough gets you captive people instead of captivated.
And one of the things that I agree with you on that is that we as an audience have become, I would think, a little more sophisticated, and we want something new, whether it's in a discussion, collaboration. We want something to keep our interest focused on what we're supposed to be focused on, because people can get, I mean, I'll be honest with you, like going to church and hearing a sermon. When I was a little boy, I used to take a pad and a paper because, man, halfway through the sermon, I was like, I was in another world. I wasn't even hearing what the minister had to say, which in my case was a rabbi, and he was probably well aware of it. But, I mean, do you find that as you're going along and you're designing new speeches and new programs, that you have to keep that in mind? I have to update it. My audiences are well educated, more sophisticated than they were, for, say, 10, 15 years ago.
I don't know if it's a sophistication question, but I do a lot of different. So if I'm doing a training for the compliance department at Comcast, which I just did a couple of weeks ago, I'm going to use very different examples in teaching my principals than I would if I'm when I was speaking at the Women in Agribusiness conference out in Minneapolis. I mean, massively different groups, same principles as far as the verbal, the vocal, the visual, being able to message effectively, knowing your audience and being able to adjust accordingly, et cetera, and projecting leadership. But it's really understanding being able to modify your talks, being able to modify your programs so that the examples and the organization and the kinds of details you share are relevant and to the point of being crucial for that audience. Again, speaking to them in a way that they can hear it. That's the most important part.
We've got a couple of minutes left. We've been talking to Dr. Laura Sicola. She is the founder of Vocal Impact Productions. You can get a hold of her at vocalimpactproductions.com. She's also the author of this wonderful book, Maximize Your Leadership Influence. She gives seminars. She goes out to Fortune 500 companies. Wonderful, wonderful person. And I know I'm going to have her back. I know I'm going to have her back on the other show that I'll be telling all of you out there about very, very soon. What is the one thing or two things you want people to take away from this book that is probably the most important thing in the book itself?
I think the most important thing is to realize that if you're not aware of the gap between how you want to come across, how you think you come across, and how you actually come across when you speak, then you're not reaching your full potential and you're leaving influence, power, and opportunity on the table. Well, that's my key takeaway.
Well, I want to thank you so very much for joining us on The Express. It has been indeed a pleasure, and you never let me down. You just hit it out of the park for me, and I appreciate that very, very much. And I thank you so much for joining us here on The Express, Dr. Laura Sicola from the Visual Impact Production. Oh, my pleasure. I'll try to give you a call as soon as we get off the air here, but I just want to thank you, and I want to thank everybody out there for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us here on The Express. Next week, we have a very special guest from MASH, Miss Loretta Swit. Hot Lips is going to join us for an hour, and it should be a whole lot of fun, a totally different discussion than what we've been having tonight. But you never know. She was always ready to seal the deal. But at any particular rate, I thank you all very much for taking time to join us. I hope your week is happy, wonderful, and healthy. And until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.
You've been listening to The Express with Gary Allen. Join us here every Tuesday night at 10 for more captivating talk with Gary Allen. See you next time on The Express.